Well, folks, I'm here with 35th District Representatives Dan Griffey and Travis Couture here in the Capitol. How are you guys doing?
We're good. How are you, Jeff?
Good. It's good to see you guys. It's nice to be here where the levers of government happen, and it's nice to see you guys in your offices here. So it's been 2 weeks or so since legislative session kicked off, and you guys continue to rise in the ranks in your party here, representing not only the 35th, but some of the other aspects of how the House Republicans work. Let's start first by talking about where you are in the hierarchy, what you're working on these days, and then we'll get into how the 35th is going to be impacted this session. Dan, we'll start with you.
Well, I was reelected to the House Republican Whip senior leadership position. I stayed on all my committees, the local government committee, the transportation committee, and the community safety committee. They keep changing the name. Community safety is way easier to say than the last one.
Sure. And what of those three do you feel could make the most impact for folks in the 35th? Is it the transportation issues that we see kind of around, or?
Well, all of them. I think out of control government regulation is one of the reasons why we have a housing supply problem. That's local government all the way, right? Growth management, all those government development regulations. But crime's out of control in Washington State. All of our constituents either label it number one or number two concern in their family, their household. So that's the community safety piece. And then transportation. I mean, we know that we have a lot of transportation problems in Washington State. We're behind on purchasing new ferries. There was an argument for the outgoing governor and the incoming governor, what type of ferries we're actually going to have, on the routes. Our perspective from House Republicans, let's put ferries on the routes. If there is a electric propulsion that is 10 years in the future, let's keep, thinking about that and developing that direction, but let's build the ferries so we actually have the inventory we need to complete the runs.
Sure.
So all three of my committees, I think, are kind of pivotal to what those in the 35th, see daily. But in the 35th, we've always complemented each other. We tried to be on separate committees so that we could be in all the policy areas that really affect the 35th residents the most. And we've accomplished that again this year. Drew's on, different committees. He stayed on Transpo so we can reconcile both of those, but he's on a whole bunch of other committees. I have a new committee obligation this year, which is the Rules Committee. That's once a bill gets out of committee, it goes to a parking or holding place, which is rules. There's a whole committee that determines what bills and when they come out and go to the floor.
Very cool. Travis, what about you?
Yeah, I was recently elected to be the assistant floor leader, so kind of controls all the messaging for our caucus on the floor and off the floor. It's a team of three, actually. It's a big job, so I'm one of three. Mm-hmm. But that's a leadership position I've been recently elected to, and on top of that, maybe even a bigger position, I'm now the House Republican Caucus's budget lead. So I'm the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee, especially in a time like this where, we're facing, depending on who you ask, a $10 billion or so budget deficit in our state. Some of the, we're facing high tax increases as well. And so I have a pretty big job on my plate this session as far as the budget is concerned. And I think for a lot of our residents, a lot of our constituents in Mason County and the 35th District, one of the number one concerns was the rising cost of property taxes across the state, and generally just affordability, the cost of gas, groceries, rent, housing, the cost of, frankly, almost everything, childcare.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to try to make Washington more affordable for our families and for people in our district, especially people in rural districts who don't have the same median household income as those in urban districts. And to make sure that we do not raise taxes, because we don't have a revenue problem in Washington, we have a spending problem. And to make sure that we create a budget that lives within our means, and make sure that when we do spend government money, that it's actually measurably impacting the things that we're spending it on, to make sure that we're actually doing good with it, and that it's actually hitting the people on the ground floor level that actually need our help the most.
Seems like you guys' leadership roles both complement each other well, as you're trying to stay and keep folks on message while you're trying to keep folks there and voting to as the caucus block there, so you can kind of work together on those two
We
things?
do have to work as a team with the floor team.
Yeah.
The floor team tells me when I need to get people on the floor, and I
Right.
make sure people get on the floor. You're
And then
absolutely
you
right.
make sure they're saying the right things, and folks are making sure they know
Well,
what's going on.
We have our caucus priorities and our messages to fix Washington, and a lot of it involves some of the things Dan said about public safety, education, affordability, things we pushed on for a long time. And I would just say for our new governor, Bob Ferguson, that has come in, he launched his inaugural speech with a very bipartisan speech filled with many of the things that were long abandoned from our side of the aisle. And so we had a little pep in our step
Yeah.
about reaching across the aisle to get certain things done that have long been problems here in the state. So I think that there's some of that going on, so that's hopeful. Anytime that you can reach across the aisle to do something good that's going to help people, or save us money or whatever it is, like that's always the best way to do it.
So has that, though, cooled off in the last 2 weeks after the inaugural address, or have you continued to see?
It's a
either
little
through-
frosty.
Okay.
Well, I would say not everybody in the majority party agrees with the new governor.
Yes.
Okay.
So as far as we found the things that we liked what he had to say, and we took him at his word, and we're full steam ahead on trying to help implement the things that we agreed with.
Yeah.
To the extent that someone keeps their promises or not, that's a wait and see.
Sure.
You can never really, you don't have a crystal ball, but there's some in the majority party who did not like to hear that there's things in this state that are broken.
Right.
And but at some point, I guess you got to hear it. So I like a little bit of a pivot back to the center, especially as it relates to budget matters and public safety matters.
Yeah.
But we'll see. The proof's in the pudding. One speech doesn't solve anything. That's a good starting place, but really the true test is at the end of the session with a veto pen or not.
$10 to $12 billion. What happened?
Well, it's he'll probably have a better way of explaining it, but over the last 4 years we've had billions of dollars in excess revenue. They projected, and Travis can correct me if I didn't get it all the way, but they projected we were going to continue on that meteoric path. We told them, put half of this money away for a rainy day because it's going to rain. Well, the rain is, we're only having like a 2.5% or something like that increase. So that is, in a $72 billion budget, those percentages actually equal out, right?
Yeah.
So their projection of all the programs, we told them for years it was going to create a bow wave. Now the bow wave's here. I'll let him talk about it more because he's digging into the numbers more than me, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the majority party over the last handful of years has assumed an unrealistic amount of revenue growth, 4.5%.
Where were they seeing that? Where were they expecting that to come in from?
So it gets a little wonky, but state law allows for budgeting reasons that you can assume 4.5% revenue growth in the second biennium of a 4-year outlook. So we budget in 2-year cycles, the biennium, but we have to balance a 4-year budget, right? And so in the second half of the 4-year budget, they're allowed to just assume 4.5% revenue growth every time. However, the problem is that we average 2.7% revenue.
Okay.
And so when you assume more money that you're never going to have, you get to manipulate the balance sheet, so to speak. And you get to book new programs and and promise to pay for them later, but never having any money to actually do those things. And so this is why they don't want to necessarily, in the majority, get rid of some of these new programs. So this is why they're proposing the largest slate of tax increases in state history. Property taxes, B&O, a wealth tax, which is an unrealized tax on capital gains. And the other part of that story about the unrealistic revenue is that we implemented things like the current capital gains tax that we have. Well, these are highly volatile taxes, meaning they thought the capital gains tax was going to take in a lot more money than it actually did. And what we see is this shrinking revenues from capital gains because you're actually taxing the most sophisticated taxpayers in our society, and there's capital flight, which means that they're going to take their money and move it somewhere else.
Sure.
So they're going to shelter it. And so that's one of the big problems with the supposed wealth tax as well. Maybe even more problems with that. And on top of this, like Dan said, during the pandemic, we had this enormous historic surplus. Well, they spent all of that. They spent all the money we didn't have in fake revenues and booked all of these things and locked us in. And that's the bow wave that he's talking about, when you book something but don't have the money for it for later.
Are there programs or things that have been implemented in hopes that are on perhaps the chopping block that are going to impact the 35th? What are some of the things that you've heard
absolutely.
about or seen that, well, I mean, now that the rubber's hitting the road, we don't have the money for this, even though maybe it's already been, if you're talking about realizing it at 2 years after the last 2 years, it's already been implemented, it already kind of been going.
Let me tell you about one really big thing, and it doesn't sound that sexy, but it's the Public Works Assistance account. And this is about $100 million in an account so that Public Works Assistance can give out very low interest loans to local governments, PUDs, whoever, to do public works projects. Things like your water, your power, all the different infrastructure needs that we have. And basically, this is one of the biggest assistance to rural communities, because we don't have, like PUD 1, for example, it doesn't have a lot of capital, so it relies on the fact that it can go get a low interest loan from Public Works Assistance, and then it's backed by the state. Well, every time we're in a budget crunch, this is the first thing the majority party sweeps, because their communities don't need it like ours do.
Sure.
And the Governor Inslee budget that was proposed before he left office, that we're kind of all working off of right now, and the framework from Governor Ferguson, which assumed all of the Inslee cuts, totally sweeps all of the funds in Public Works Assistance. My budget is going to try to save that because these are the low interest ways in which we could build infrastructure in our communities. Things that we've done with not only our capital budget funds to build new water pipes in Matlock or in Union, or whatever, water tanks and storage.
Power distribution
in Shelton, or a host of things. And this is really critical, not only because, well, our residents deserve to have upgraded infrastructure, but also because it means more housing. Up in the Manzanita area, up in Union, they're probably going to build 300 new homes up there. And a lot of that infrastructure in that area, I don't think Manzanita yet, but maybe in the future, but a lot of that infrastructure up there has been funded for in part by Public Works Assistance, federal funds, or by our state capital budget funds. And without that stuff, we don't have a place for our kids to live,
And builders see that this may go away, and they go, well, I can find another community outside.
Well, that it's turnkey, that has all those things,
yeah.
that has the sewer, that
Right.
has the power, and those sort of things.
Some people don't like it, but we live in a world today where developers, it doesn't pencil out for them in this state unless governments lay out the red carpet infrastructure-wise. And I know some people don't like that, but that's just the way it is. If you don't do that, they just won't come.
Sure.
And so we need developers to help build new manufacturing and create jobs and housing and so many other things.
This is the wrong time to dip into the Public Works Trust Fund. It's a fund that is a self-revolving fund, right? The people, when they're paying the low interest loan payments, it replenishes the fund.
Right.
When we sweep it, it takes away all that ability. But right now, interest rates are so high. Money is expensive. When money was not so expensive and interest rates were 2.25%, 3% on large jumbo loans that the counties would take out, the Public Works assistance account wasn't as necessary. But in times like this, that's when they're really necessary. So, Shelton could borrow a little money to do some more paving. To that end, Travis and I are both running a bill that would allow Mason County to use their paving and striping equipment in an unlimited manner in Mason County, hopefully to stretch the Shelton's paving budget so they can get on top of their roads eventually. I know it's going to take us a while to get there, but we're working on the real bills that we can on the ground to make sure that our locally elected people can take care of all of those infrastructure needs so we can grow.
And at the same time, trying to prevent bad things from happening, like the governor's budget proposes to shut down Mission Creek, the women's low impact prison up in North Mason, in Belfair. A lot of our people work there, and without it, there's only one women's prison left in the entire state. And I don't know if that's a good idea if you're trying to have a step-down approach for reentry into our communities for people who will get out at some point. And so we're trying to protect against that, public safety related things as well. We don't want to see our district be harmed by kind of reckless and unthoughtful cuts, but we do need to make a lot of cuts. I mean, we have spent like drunken sailors in this state, and we need to reel it back in. And 2/3 of the people right now, as polled through Elway, say that we want you to reduce spending and no new taxes, period. It's a pretty large number for any issue in this state.
I think it's encouraging that the governor hired Jesse Jones. I mean, I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, yeah.
But, get Jesse, right?
He can find it. If
Yeah.
there's something going on, he'll find it.
I've said for, the whole time that you've been interviewing me, like the government has gone a certain direction for 40 years. It is time that we refresh the place, that we look at a different way of doing things. Jesse Jones can do that. He can dig in and find out there is waste in our government agencies. There is. Is there 13 billion? Is there 10 billion? Well, that's up to Travis to find. But I don't think so, right? So in these cuts that we make, we want to make sure that we are cutting those things that will not impact those people that don't have the ability to overcome that, and especially our struggling local governments that we have in Mason County, in the rest of the 35th as a whole. Public Works Trust Fund, they need to borrow out of that account at times. Timely completion of projects when the contractor is able to do it. That's another thing that most of our local governments are dealing with, is supply of people actually doing the work. That's why I'm proposing the bill allowing Mason County to use their paver and their striping machine that I'm so happy they have it. I'm very, very proud of the Mason County Commissioners, the way they've controlled costs, right? Mason County is benefiting good roads that are well striped. Once the striping machine's in service, they'll be able to stripe 100% of the roads a day. They will have excess capacity that they will be able to then use throughout our county. We want to make sure that government can be as efficient as possible and still complete their mission, and we think we can get there.
One thing that's going to be tough if there are cuts or freezes or whatever is trying to get the state out of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to law enforcement and protection. 51st out of all the states plus DC. I think the county is at 0.9 per 1,000 residents for
Unacceptable.
those types of things. How do you square that when you'll need to invest in those types of things? I've heard the governor talk a little bit about those types of.
Well, he's dusting off the priorities of government model. I'm really proud of this.
Yeah, so budgets are just a reflection of our values. And you have to be able to prioritize what your constitutional duties are, what your key core functions of government are first. Our paramount duty is K-12 education. It says so right in the Constitution. Public safety flows right under that. Mm-hmm. But right now in Washington, what we've done over the last couple of years in the budget is try to make the budget a little bit for everybody, but not enough for anybody. And the problem with that is when you spread the peanut butter so thin, you start to fund this junk drawer of programs that maybe they're good, maybe they're not, but regardless, we're not always going to check in on the results. What are the key performance indicators? What's the ROI? Did we actually get what we paid for? Oftentimes no, but it's so monolithic, it's hard to look into it all. It gets to be a daunting task, but we need to fund what's important to us first and then see what we have for the rest. And as we go forward with things like law enforcement, public safety, solving that lowest per capita police problem, so yes, it is good to fund the police. It's important to fund the police. The governor and frankly our party has been saying for a long time, we'd like to give $100 million to law enforcement. We're working on that right now. Those are things that even in the midst of a budget deficit, we still have record revenues in this state. But we have to prioritize, should we fund our schools, like Shelton School District, which is millions of dollars in the hole?
Yeah.
Or should we fund law enforcement, which we have barely any on our streets, before we fund someone's pet project or grant program through Department of Commerce? Right? And so, of course, somebody loves that grant program, but is it more important than our schools or our police?
Yeah.
And it's not. No, almost anybody would say it's not as important. And so here's the thing I'll say about the police, though. You can give $100 million, $200 million, $500 million, but it's not going to solve the problem by itself. We should fully fund and make sure the funds are available, but you can continue. Right now, there's already generous incentives to be hired in county jails and law enforcement until you finally, as a state government, start to respect the law enforcement and allow them to do their job without looking over their shoulder. We will continue to have this lowest per capita police crisis on our hands. The money is step A, make sure it's available. Step B,
The environment.
the working conditions and the environment for police in our state. Until it is as attractive to be a cop here as it is in neighboring Idaho or Wyoming or Montana, whatever neighboring state, we're not going to attract people to want to do a dangerous job where their life is on the line if they have to look over their shoulder for the people that employ them, right? And we've seen this with Office of Independent Investigations and so many other things. So I would say, from my perspective, we're halfway there with the governor. We agree on the funding, part A, but part B, I don't know if we're there. Like, our party wants to respect police and allow them to do their jobs reasonably. Police reform isn't bad, but it should be done in conjunction with asking police what we should do.
Right.
And not just ramming it down like ending police pursuits and other police tactics that they absolutely need to be able to be safe so they don't get killed on the streets. And right now that's been a devastating thing for our crime statistics in Washington. And you got to be able to get step B, which is respect the police, allow them to do their job reasonably. Hey, if there's a bad apple, if somebody does something wrong, sure, we'll do something about that. When we should do something about that. But we shouldn't be so unreasonable that these guys can't even feel like they could be safe and still do their job.
Sure. And I think, and I'm sure you saw this, but Pioneer School District in Mason County recently brought back a new revamped DARE program.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
which
so
I
proud of
think
that,
is
yeah.
another step forward in showing officers in a different light and being proud to have. I have a friend who's got, like, at their elementary school, a career day coming up, and there was concern of having law enforcement as, this is my career, because of how maybe it would come across with the kids seeing it if they're having bad troubles in their home life or something like that. And I couldn't really believe that when I heard it, but that's what one of the reasons was, that they said to not have a law enforcement professional there to kind of show off, and be proud. And I know in Thurston County, Sheriff Sanders is doing a lot of public outreach and really getting out there. And Sperling, of course, in Mason County always is in the community eye and trying to put forth the best effort for the county there.
I'm really proud of all three sheriffs that we have in 35. They come at it from different political perspectives, but their heart, their mission, their drive, their goal is all in the same place. I went this last summer up to Sheriff Gacy up in Kitsap County, and he did a taxpayer day. Come see everything we got, everything we do. I'll let you use our taser. I'll let you use a pepper sprayer. Look at our simulator that we train on regularly.
Yeah.
Here's our pursuit driving. This is why we do this. This is how we track people a canine. This is what it looks like when they latch. This is what it looks like when we tell them not to latch. Building that trust back, they're trying to do it the right way. I think Washingtonians, and my dear seatmate said it right, their work conditions were in shambles since the Black Lives Matter movement. We knee-jerked their working conditions. And we passed so many bills that really made law enforcement professionals think, can I stay in this profession? Can I take care of my family? Because it is a job. It is a noble job. It's a job that we should embolden and empower them to do, but they still want to take care of their family. They don't want to go to prison enacting the legislation that we pass here. They want predictable working conditions like everybody does in society. And I agree with all three of us are. We want to fix the funding issue. We also want to fix the working conditions issue, and that means we got to back off on some of this stuff. Let some of the new laws and rules that we passed actually take effect. Let them get used to them, and I think we'll turn things around if we do.
Always great talking with you guys here. Representative Dan Griffey, Travis Couture here in the 35th, and we'll be out here through the session to kind of update folks on what's happening for people in the 35th. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.